Hello, everyone, and welcome into the Go 24/7 podcast. It's been a while. My name's Bryce Koon. Since we've had Glen West, Sonny, Shipp, and myself all on one, which signals recruiting is about to heat up even more as we get closer and closer to the opening of the transfer portal, early signing day, and just the final two games of the regular season. Guys, we'll start with you, Glenn. I know you covered basketball yesterday. There's some good things going on in basketball recruiting that we might touch on in this podcast, and that's about where the ship ends, I think, with basketball news.
Yeah, he's got one eye steered towards next year already after 3 games. I think that look, the team right now is in a pretty bad spot. Losing two straight in buzzer beater kind of fashion, where nothing really looked right in terms of the final 7 minutes yesterday, and then. Of course, for most of the first half against the Nichols game, it was just atrocious. So you've got a couple top 60 commits coming in next year, but outside of that, I mean, you're got all fingers crossed on the Jalen Cook appeal, but that's pretty much where I'm at with basketball. There's really
Yeah.
not a ton on the court right now that you can say that they can really build on and set kind of a standard for their season, because they don't really have a whole lot of help right now.
Yeah, it's building for the future, that's for sure. But guys, let's talk about a couple things here today, and I wanted to start off with this. And Sonny, we'll let you lead off with this. Obviously, some of the biggest questions on our board on social media and just around this LSU program have really stemmed from the effects of the coaching carousel that we're about to undergo. And one of those is obviously the loss of Jimbo Fisher, his job at Texas A&M. LSU fans are wondering, hey, how does that affect some of the guys that we were looking at? So let's lead it off here with you. What does that look like, and how involved is LSU going to be with maybe some of the high school guys? And we can talk portal guys a little bit later, but some of the high school guys that were either committed or looking or leaning towards the Aggies.
Well, I think when LSU's been trying to poach those guys from this Aggie class for well over a month now. So, I don't think you're going to see any names all of a sudden just shoot up to the top of the board from Texas A&M's class. Same thing with Mississippi State. One of the everyone when you see a coaching change, it can go either one of two directions. The new coach, the players who are already committed to the old coach, they're so loyal to them and that staff, and they just end up just shutting it down completely and looking in other directions. But on the flip side of that, you've got a new coach coming in who's just going to bring a lot of excitement on the recruiting trail. And so while LSU will have there will be some cracks in the door for LSU to be able to continue to work their way in with guys like Gabe Relaford, Terry Bussey. Those I think are the two guys right there to jump out at you. Obviously, Dominic McKinley's another one. But when you look at, when you look at the flip side of that, then you wonder, okay, a new coach who comes in, let's just say, and who knows, let's just say a guy like Deion Sanders, a guy like Dan Lanning. Let's say Texas A&M hits on one of the guys that they really want. Well, that coach who's coming in is going to bring a lot of excitement with him. And, while it's good to look at Texas A&M's commits and wonder who you can get or the targets out there, I do think that LSU is going to have some nervous moments down the stretch. I think that the new coach coming in at Texas A&M very well could target Jelani Watkins, a guy that, that if Jimbo Fisher and that staff, if they would have pressed, as hard as LSU was, who knows what would have happened with Jelani Watkins. So that's one guy right there. Then you obviously, you look at the other Texas commits, Weston Davis, a one-time commit to Texas A&M. Who knows if they bring in a new offensive line coach that he has a previous relationship with. So there's just a lot of variables at play that you're really not going to get any answers on, until Texas A&M hires that guy. But the good thing for LSU is that whoever they do hire is going to be limited in time. He's not going to have a ton of time on his side to be able to come in, to be able to get a staff in place, to be able to determine who he's going to keep, who he's not going to keep. So that's going to bring a lot of questions in the recruits' minds on the recruiting trail. And, the LSU staff, they'll be getting out on the road the day after that Texas A&M game for in-home visits. And so they'll be able to kind of sow put some of those seeds in the ground in some of those heads, and then be able to answer some questions the recruits have on their own about LSU. So exciting time coming up. But for the Texas A&M, the Mississippi State, and any other coaching search out there coming up, you just really have to just put a big TBD out there and just enjoy the roller coaster ride with the rumors.
Yeah, Glenn, I want to go to you on this because we talk a lot about roster construction. We get a lot of questions about that. I mean, look, there's some big names on that Aggie roster that are currently playing that LSU would really like to have on next year's team. I know that you and I have both kind of been talking with people on the board. You know, Evan Stewart would be a nice guy to give a call to. Is there anyone that you're looking at maybe outside of Stewart? I know they got some really, really fantastic defensive linemen. When you look at that roster, this is an opportunity for portal. It opens up on December the 4th, but it's already open because of that coaching vacancy for Texas A&M. What do you kind of think is something that they could look as, this frenzy season kind of starts to kick off?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly the first call that I'm making, especially if LSU is in a position where you're looking at Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas both moving on from the program after this year, it's going to be to a guy like Evan Stewart. I mean, he's a very dynamic receiver, somebody that I think would fit well next to Nussmeier, and kind of be that go-to option if they lose those two guys. But I mean, look, when you have a coaching change like this, I mean, of course, there's going to be programs out there that are going to be looking at rosters and stuff. But, I would give serious look at a guy like maybe Jacoby Matthews, who's a former Louisiana recruit and guy that LSU recruited very hard, really wanted as part of its class in the secondary. I think he would make a ton of sense because, you're going to be losing some attrition there at the safety position with guys like Major Burns, Andre Sam, moving on, certainly with what's going on with Greg Brooks right now. Don't think you can expect him to be playing any kind of football. It's much more of a life situation right now with him. And
Yeah.
so, I think that they're going to have some stuff that they're going to have to look at in terms of their defensive line and certainly in the secondary with a guy like Matthews. I mean, they have A&M, I'll say this, they have a ton of talent on the defensive line and a ton of talent at edge rusher. I mean, Shamar Stewart is a former 5-star recruit that's there right now. I mean, that 2022 class, it was just littered with 5 stars and high 4 stars. It's one of the highest ranked classes, I believe, in the country of all time. There's a lot of talent there, and I think a lot of talent that LSU could use, especially on the defensive side of the ball. But the flip side to this is that LSU's already kind of gone into A&M, that A&M well, and taking a guy like Denver Harris, and that hasn't exactly panned out for him. So I think it's really going to be about fit and opportunity more than anything, and it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I would like to have a guy like a Jacoby Matthews on board, former Louisiana guy who could come in and potentially play for you right away. He's got some size, some length, but certainly Evan Stewart, I think, would be the guy. We were writing this roundtable thing today, and all of us kind of penciled receiver as a really, really big need, especially if you lose your top 2 guys. So I think Evan Stewart would make a ton of sense in terms of coming in and having a true number 1 option for us next year, because I don't think you can go into next year thinking, all right, Aaron Anderson, Chris Hilton, Kyron Lacey, potentially. I mean, if that's going to be kind of your top group, you better hope that Nuss takes a big jump in terms of his throwing and in terms of his development, because that's an unproven group, I think, as a whole right now. I think they've had some moments, particularly Lacey has shown you some flashes of being a big play guy. Hilton's had a couple big grabs, but nothing to the point where you're super, super stoked about what that could look like next year as a core group. So I do think that receiver is going to be a big time look in the portal. I think the defensive line is going to be a big look. I think secondary with safety and corners are going to be a big look again. But we also talked with Brian Kelly even on Thursday, and he said a big part of this offseason in particular in terms of what they're going to be looking at is retention more than anything else, more than addition. I mean, the last couple of years they've had to really dive into the portal with double-digit numbers. They really don't want to do that, I don't think, this year. I think they'd like to retain a lot more of their roster this year instead of having to, constantly flip over, something like the defense here where, you've seen it, continuity and chemistry from year to year. It just hasn't really translated these first couple seasons. And I think that they want to get into a position where they have a couple guys around the program for a few years. So it's going to be some big selling points, I think, this offseason, and certainly in the weeks following the regular season, that LSU hopes they can keep a lot of their defensive core or some of their defensive core intact, and then kind of sand out the edges from there.
Yeah, you want to get to a point where you're adding maybe single digits, and it's kind of the cherry on top rather than kind of the meat and potatoes of that group. And I think too, you mentioned, look, we can all have a free agent wish list that you see in other sports when it comes to this portal stuff. But you hit the nail on the head. I mean, Evan Stewart's a guy that I guarantee is going to at least be reached out to by this staff, by Cortez Hankton and this staff. Shamar Stewart, Walter Nolan. I mean, look, when Texas A&M rolls in here next week, they're still going to have a very formidable front seven that's going to be a fun matchup to watch, regardless of who the head coach is. And Sonny pointed this out. I cannot remember the full name of their interim head coach. It's Elijah something, but reading in between the lines and looking at it, Elijah Robinson, he's very well respected, and it speaks volumes about that they went to him as the interim head coach instead of Bobby Petrino, who has head coaching experience, DJ Durkin, who's had a rocky head coach experience, and Steve Adazio, who has rocky head coaching experience up at Boston College. So Sonny's shaking his head down there. Quite the staff over there in College Station that they've accumulated. It's interesting, but LSU fans are going to want to point fun, and hopefully they get that win next weekend. Guys, we're going to talk about potential dominance.
That's another thing that I think we should probably mention here before we move on. Next week's going to be a big week, I think, in terms of the immediate 2024 guys. I mean, if you're hoping to get Bussey and Relaford on board, there wouldn't be much better of a last pitch to those two players than for them to come in next weekend and watch LSU knock off A&M in commanding fashion. I mean, I think that would we'll see if that would make a huge difference, but I think that it would certainly be another positive momentum boost for LSU and their recruitment if they were to get those two guys on campus, and you have a good showing here in your regular season finale and kind of show that you're a program that's still on the rise and not one that's maybe plateaued like an A&M has these last several years.
Yeah, I think you almost said couple, and then you changed it to several, and you could probably say 6 years that they've just kind of plateaued in this weird spot. So, been very interesting. Guys, let's take a look at some dominoes that are going to be falling for this 2025 class over the next 3 months. We're going to start it with the kid that literally plays in the shadows of LSU's football facility. Keelan Moses is going to be making that decision on November the 30th. Sonny, the latest on that, and how do you feel as we get closer and closer? We're a lot of us are going to be finishing off our Thanksgiving leftovers the week after, and we're going to be waiting for this Keelan Moses decision. How do you feel as we roll closer and closer to that decision date?
Yeah, he seems intent on shocking the world. I know he's tweeted that I don't know how many times over the last few weeks. Right now, I don't think it's going to be a big shock. I think he's going to stay home, and I think it's going to be LSU right now. But who knows? Who knows when it comes to recruiting? Obviously, Florida. Florida's a school that has kind of made him a priority. Has Corey Raymond obviously over there. They've got that relationship. He's got a really close relationship with the family and stuff, going back to even before LSU recruited Dylan Moses, who went to Bama. So there's some ties they have right there. I know he took a trip out to Oregon. Really liked that. I think he went out to Colorado too, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure he went out to Colorado too. But as of right now, I think LSU's in a good position. I think LSU and especially Frank Wilson's recruited that family forever, going back to Dylan Moses when LSU offered him. I want to say he was in 7th or 8th grade. I think 8th grade, if I'm not mistaken. Could have been 7th though. But anyway, they recruited him for 5+ years, 6+ years.
What happened there? I mean, if they were recruiting for 5 or 6 years, like how do you lose that guy? I mean, he went to Bama after all that. I mean, that's a little surprising, but.
Well, that was also the whole Les Miles thing and get him getting canned and stuff that all played into that, know. And so, but my point being is that they've recruited that family for a long time, and so I would be really surprised if it was anything anything but LSU. And then that sets up Harlem Barry in December, a good segue into, one of the, depending on which set of rankings you look at, one of the top 3 running backs in the country, a 5-star right there out of New Orleans. And I think LSU, once again, Frank Wilson and Sherman Wilson have really positioned LSU to where I like where LSU is in that race as well. And that would be, that would be 2 big pickups and really kind of springboard them into, into that big January announcement.
Yeah, before we get to that big January, Glenn, I want to go to you because I know, look, Keelan Moses, a fantastic athlete for ULAB Baton Rouge down here, or ULAB LSU. He does a good job with everything he does on the field, but profiles as that linebacker, which you said, look, linebacker is going to need some help kind of in the future because you're not really going to have probably Harold Perkins when Keelan Moses gets to campus in 2025. So your thoughts, on what Moses would bring to the table for the roster, and then we'll talk about Harlem Barry, who, like Sonny said, top 3 running back in the country, no matter whose ranking you're looking at. This kid's a playmaker.
Yeah, I mean, look, the future of the linebacker spot right now, I think, is still very much up in the air, especially when you're thinking about it in 2 years' time, much less just next year, where you could be in a spot where does LSU really want to try Harold at inside linebacker again this offseason? I mean, like, what does that look like? And then you potentially be losing Omar Spates after this year as well. I mean, there's the cupboard would be pretty bare at that point with the Weeks brothers and Christian Brathwaite kind of as your young ascending pieces that you'd hope to kind of stick around. But so I do think that even, look, the portal position, our portal addition for linebacker would be very, very necessary for LSU this offseason. But when you look at 2025 and when Moses would potentially be getting here, then the cupboard's really bare, and you don't really know exactly what you're going to be looking at in a couple years' time at that position group. And so it would be a big addition for sure if LSU was able to land him and certainly get him into the program pretty early. Very explosive athlete, like Sonny said. So there's a lot of when you're looking this far into the future in terms of guys that you want on the roster, I think you have to prioritize those Louisiana pieces, and I think that if you land these 2. You feel really, really good about yourself. I mean, you look at the running back situation, and you'd have in 2025 a junior and Caleb Jackson and Trey Holly, and then you'd have a second-year guy in Caden Durham, and then you can kind of mix in Harlem Barry as a true freshman. That's a really, really good, strong nucleus at running back there if you have those guys in 2 years' time. So I do think that LSU is going to be in a good position here with a couple of these Louisiana pieces. I mean, I think you have to really continue to recruit this state hard because as we've already seen, 2025 and 2026 is very rich in talent with Louisiana prospects. And so getting as many of those guys on board as possible, I think only helps. And I think it's something that the LSU staff has certainly worked towards for years now and will continue to do so. So I'll be very interested to see just kind of how that plays out. But I do think that, Moses and certainly Barry and James Simons, another in-state recruit that I know they'd love to have, several others that are already committed. They want to build that wall in Louisiana, and you've got to start at the top with those players. And we saw them, they've already missed out on a couple big ones this recruiting cycle. They missed out on a few last recruiting cycle. I know that was very much out of their hands, and you never were going to get a guy like Arch Manning on board or whatever. But they've certainly, I think, got to continue to build those walls up in Louisiana because the talent over the next couple of recruiting cycles in particular is going to be really, really, really rich, and I think could be a foundational kind of piece to what LSU's trying to build here over the next several years.
Well, those 2 dominoes that we talked about in Keelan Moses and Harlem Barry would not only add immense talent to your room, but guys, it just continues to build the resume of what this 2025 class could be. And I sit in the camp as if that January decision of Bryce Underwood goes the way that LSU fans want it, you're talking about one of the best classes all time that they could start to build with that 2025 class. So, Sonny, we sit 2 months out from this decision, or I guess No, I mean, I can't believe January is going to be here fairly soon. But, how do you feel on the Bryce Underwood, especially with the news? And I'll preface it with this. Michigan adds a 4-star quarterback from the 2025 class out of the state of Florida. And it seems that they're willing to go 2 quarterbacks. But I don't know if you saw, Bryce Underwood's, kind of sarcastic tweet he had where it said bet. That was something that J.J. McCarthy and them were doing about Jim Harbaugh. And it was kind of, a lot of people think it's alluding to the news of Michigan adding the quarterback. LSU fans were excited. So your thoughts, where they said a month and a half out, really, from Bryce Underwood's decision date?
Well, the fact that Colorado and Michigan have quarterback commitments, I think that's a non-factor. Bryce Underwood, Bryce Underwood's the type of player to where he makes other quarterbacks decommit. He's not worried about who's on board or anything like that. And I think that for LSU, I think the best thing that can happen for LSU is that all this Michigan stuff and Jim Harbaugh, the speculation really starts ramping up, like it does every year around this time about the NFL. Is he going to go to the NFL? Is the NCAA going to come down, on top of what the Big Ten did? Just all the speculation out there only helps LSU and really gives Joe Sloan, Mike Denbrock, and Brian Kelly just a chance to stand on their pulpit and just preach Jaden Daniels, the quarterback development. You come here, look at the offense you're going to have. LSU fans want to know the best way to hold on to DeCorian Moore, the 5-star receiver out of Duncanville. Bring another 5-star into the fold. Harlem Barry, bring another 5-star into the fold. Bryce Underwood, start surrounding those pieces, and I think that would really help in keeping a guy like Moore on board. But a lot of eyes, I think, are going to be on the Michigan host Ohio State, the Saturday that LSU host Texas A&M.
Yep.
Does Underwood pop up over in Ann Arbor? Some folks making a kind of a big deal about, he hasn't been to Ann Arbor yet this year. Yeah, but he's been 18 times in the past.
He essentially lives in Ann Arbor.
Exactly. So, yeah, he's probably tired of the place for a little bit, So I get so that doesn't really bother me that much. The thing that I'm going to be keeping an eye on is just that speculation, just that rumor mill. Does it keep going? Is that something that is still in the back of their mind? Really like where Sloan, Kelly, and Denbrock have LSU positioned in this race. And you never want, and I don't think that it is in this, that it is in this case, you never want to deal with an NIL situation like a Jaden Rashada in Florida and all of that. I don't think that LSU will have to deal with a situation like that. But you always wonder when you're dealing with quarterbacks, when you're dealing with 5-stars. We know about the stories and the talk of LSU's coffers, how they're not as rich and deep as some other schools and stuff like that. So, there's just so many factors over these next 2 months that you have to kind of keep an eye on. But in recruiting, if you look at this day and time we're in right now, I don't think LSU would want to trade its spot with anyone else.
Glenn, you talk about that spot. I mean, yeah, this team's not going to be playing in an SEC title game, or they're not going to be playing in a bowl game, but that second week in December, there's a strong chance their quarterback's going to be sitting in New York. That's another pitch for Bryce Underwood to look a month out from his decision and say, wow. I mean, talk about Jaden Daniel's success and how it can translate to just a continuing building resume for Joe Sloan and Mike Denbrock to sit here and say, the proof's here. I mean, we don't have to go out and make up hypotheticals. This is what can happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think Brian Kelly put it best. I think he talked about it some on Monday in his press conference on Monday, where he talked. Somebody asked him the question about how Jaden Daniel's season affects them in recruiting going forward, and he says, "Well, I mean, if Jaden's going to be there in New York City and is going to be a Heisman finalist, and if he winds up winning it, that's 2 Heisman trophies in 5 years for LSU's program." And I know that they're different coaching staffs and whatnot, but he said, I think his exact quote was, that's not an accident. It's going to be a trend. And if you can start building that trend of having elite offenses and building, a foundational kind of forward-moving offense that has been so electric this year. Was certainly that way in 2019, and even last year, I thought had its moments where you could see that the writing was on the wall that this thing was going to be really, really successful. That speaks not only to a guy like Underwood, who's a very a guy who I think you can expect to come in and play very, very early in his career, but also to other elite weapons like, DeCorian Moore, who's on board right now, to, some of these receivers and running backs that LSU is really hotly pursuing in 2025. So I think that makes an immense impact on just the on-field product. And is this an on-field product that you want to come join as a system and, be, kind of the next guy in line to kind of take those reins. I think that's absolutely a pitch that LSU can make, and could be something that helps tip the scales in their favor come January. You never know, but I know that if I was a recruit out there and I was looking at the way LSU's operating on offense right now, it would be very, very high on the list of places that I would want to go because of just how consistent they've been, how explosive they've been. I asked Brian Kelly yesterday a question on Malik Neighbors and him potentially being able to break the all-time receiving yards record at LSU. And a lot of that production's come in the last 2 years with Kelly and with Cortez Hankton and certainly Denbrock calling plays. And, Kelly essentially said it's just another piece that we can pitch to these recruits to say, hey, you know what? This guy is doing this in 2 years that we've been here. He's had back-to-back 1,000-yard receiving seasons, and was up for the Bolitnikoff Award. And we've got probably the best 1-2 duo in terms of receiver in the country. That's all great stuff that you can add to the pitch, certainly for freshmen and high school recruits, but also for portal guys as well. So all that stuff I think makes an impact. Certainly with the way NIL is right now, that's always going to be there. I mean, that's always going to be a part of these conversations and what LSU can offer in that respect. But I think the biggest thing that, I've learned from Kelly in the last several months of him talking about NIL is that they do a pretty good job of not, off making, just verbatim offers, but they do a good job of pitching to these recruits that, if you come in here and you work hard, the NIL opportunities will come with that, and you'll be able to set yourself up pretty nicely once you get here. So I think that's a really strong approach to take. Look, you're going to miss on some guys, but I think a lot of these prospects that kind of watch what LSU's doing, particularly on the offensive side of the ball, you come in here and it seems like if you perform well, it'll be pretty easy to make some of that NIL money if you go out there and you have a strong work ethic and you earn your spot and you kind of earn your place in the rotation. You're gonna find some success.
Yeah, you've got an offensive group that you mentioned. You're probably going to have a Heisman finalist. You're probably going to have a Bolitnikoff Award finalist and a Joe Moore Award semifinalist and potentially finalist as well with that LSU offensive line. It's the best resume that you could possibly want heading into this next cycle. Guys, we'll end it with this right here. And I wanted to talk about this. There was a large miss rate on the portal, and we can all effectively say that of what they did last year. Sonny, what is that something? We'll start with you on this. They can't obviously afford that again if they want to continue to build and trend upward as a program. Is that something that it has to change in the evaluation or maybe the development side of things? Things didn't occur. Where do you sit on the fence with that?
Oh, I think that's just a byproduct of the portal. I mean, you're getting guys who have been embedded in other locker rooms for, Denver Harris 1 year, Deuce Chestnut spent 3 years in the Syracuse locker room. I don't think it's any secret that, those two guys right here were huge bust, for this season for what they were brought in for. And you go back and you look at, they're not playing because LSU's got so many able bodies in the cornerback room and competition is so stiff. They're not playing because of something they did or something they didn't do, and probably a combination of the both. I think both of them you have to put, very questionable futures in doubt. Chestnut, he came here with 2 years to play in a red shirt. So he still had that. So he could use this as a red shirt year. You hope gets his act together and stuff. Denver Harris, he's played in too many games to be able to redshirt. And but there's no question that you've either got to move on from those two, and you got to replace them, or you got to get something out of them next year.
Yeah.
And I think when you look at the cornerback situation now for LSU, if you don't get a Terry Bussey, I don't think it makes any sense to go out and just bring somebody in, because you got a lot of guys in that cornerback room. You
Yeah.
just don't have the right guys and the right guys with experience right now. And so, instead of adding another cornerback to the room, I think you take what you got and you go into it, and then you go and you say, okay, you find that J.K. Johnson, you find that Denver Harris, you find that portal guy who looks like he could be a number one corner, and you say, we have an opening. Come be that
Yeah.
guy. But you just have to, you have to do your due diligence. Denver Harris didn't come here without any baggage. That was a risk that Brian Kelly chose to take. And, I think that, you're going to have some of those risks that are going to pay off. You're going to have some of them that don't. But as far as, the nature of the beast, I just think that's what we deal with now. That's what you deal with now with the portal. You're also getting guys, instead of recruiting guys who are 16, 17, and 18-year-olds, now in some cases you're recruiting 20 or 21-year-olds. And so they're at different places in the maturity in their life. Some of them have matured for good reasons. Some of them, their maturity level just went the opposite way. And, that's just a product of what you're going to get. And going back to what Glenn said, Kelly said this, and I've mentioned this in the past too, is that LSU is not going to have a huge portal class. When you go back, when you look at the numbers and everything, they don't have a big graduating senior class going out either. And they've already got 25 commitments. I can see them signing as many as 29, maybe even getting up to 30. And so they're going to have some attrition. In the past, when they had that attrition to the portal, it was like, okay, let's go out. We lost an offensive lineman. Let's go find one. We lost one. Let's go find one. I think what you see them is they're planning ahead for that attrition that they know is coming. And instead of having to go out and get portal guys, they're using that to load up on the high school and JUCO front.
Yeah. Obviously, some names that you should keep tabs on at Go 24/7. Glenn, end us off right here with this. As much as frustrating for fans it has been to miss in the secondary at spots, you've had, I would say, two pretty nice rotational pieces in Paris Shand and Jordan Jefferson at the defensive line position that have, been, I think, exactly what you probably expected them to. And then you've had Logan Diggs, which has probably been one of the best portal additions that LSU's had since the portal really has kicked off. I know, Joe Burrow was it, and I get that. But Logan Diggs was been a really, really nice piece. Jaden Daniels, very, very nice. Where do you sit in the comfort level of this group's ability to kind of, you want to hit more on the more Logan Diggs situations, more Jordan Jefferson situations than the Deuce Chestnuts and the Denver Harrises?
Yeah, I think we'll learn a little bit more about just how efficient or how good they are in the portal recruiting with these next couple cycles, if it's true that they really want to take less guys. I mean, when you're taking 15 guys every year, of course, there's going to be some pieces that don't work out, that don't get the playing time that you want, or get the playing time that they want, or really work out the way that you hope. So, I mean, like if they let's just say they whittle it down from 15 to 6 guys this year that they signed out of the portal, they have to knock all those 6 guys out of the park. Like they have to make sure that the guys that they're bringing in, the list that they're whittling down, they all have to be immediate contributors. You're not bringing in a guy out of the portal, and this is what Kelly has talked about so much over the last year or two. They don't want to bring in guys just to fill depth like they have done like the last couple of years. They want to bring in guys that they know can come in and make an immediate impact with the program. Now, a couple of those guys you brought in last year that you were hoping would make that immediate impact, like in the secondary with, as Sonny mentioned, Harris and Chestnut, that didn't work out at all. So, I mean, like they have to be able to make sure that their evaluations are intact, that they know exactly what they're going to be getting from these players when they bring them in this offseason. So I think that if you're really going to be tested this offseason in terms of how they build that out, how many transfers they bring in, and just what that looks like in terms of immediate impact guys. But I do think that it's going to be really, really important that if you're going to really stick to your guns and go 5, 6, maybe 7 guys, I'm not sure how many they go, that they all are going to be players that can come in and help you win games next year. But that's going to be just one piece of it. I think a much bigger piece, and something that Kelly alluded to a lot on Thursday, is going to be about player retention. I think that they're going to have a lot of these exit meetings with these guys and trying to talk them into coming back next year, especially on defense. Like I feel like you need to have a core foundation on defense you can build around for a couple years. Those guys have underwhelmed, I think, for the most part. I don't think anybody on here is going to disagree that the defense has not looked great. But I think you have to keep some of those guys around and hope that they develop this offseason, hope that they can continue to take some building blocks into 2024, and that continuity and that chemistry isn't being turned over so much on a year-to-year basis. I think that's going to be a much, much bigger part of this offseason than maybe people realize.
Yeah, as much as you recruit the portal, the high school rankings, you got to re-recruit your own roster each and every single year. That's going to be something really big to hit. But hey, if you want the latest news and the latest conversation happening around, head over to Go 24/7, the LSU arm of 24/7 Sports. Great network that you can check out. And Sonny, I know we've got a great deal that we're about to hit off with some people. It's a chance for them to get a maybe a Christmas present. If your dad's a big LSU fan, your granddad's a big LSU fan, you want to join in on some great conversation with us, tell people how they can find that deal and what exactly they get all with that.
Yeah, come get on that 75% off deal. I think it's going to start Thursday night. It's this Black Friday deal, 75% off. It's like, I think it comes out to like 5 cents a day, 6 cents a day, or something crazy like that for the next year. And so just a great chance, a great time to get on there and stuff. And you get to spend your holidays with all of us and a bunch of LSU fans, right?
Yeah, and just brought in a big portal guy and Matt Zenitz to the national crew. So like if you want to get in on portal action, that's the guy. And so we're making moves over here and we're bringing in the right people. So we're excited about that, and we definitely want everybody to kind of come join the community and interact with us bums a little bit and see if we can't continue to grow the site out some. So we're all excited.
Keep Glen friendly and keep Glen comfortable during basketball season. That's the biggest thing. Come and join the site, join the conversation on that. But no, it's a great deal. You make sure you take advantage of it. Look, you're not going to get anything for 5 cents a day. I mean, that's just it's not going to happen like that. And if you're an LSU fan, it's a great place to read a bunch of content and get some VIP stuff as well. But hey, we appreciate you. If you're watching or listening to this podcast, the way you can support that is you can go over and you can get that subscription to Go 24/7, and you can also hit the subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube, or follow the podcast feed, whether you're listening after the fact on Spotify, Apple, or anywhere that you get your podcast. Sonny, Shipp, Glen West, my name's Bryce Koon. We'll catch you next time, as next week's a big one. They play Georgia State this weekend, Texas A&M to round out the regular season. And then Glen gets to figure out if he's going to be going to Orlando, Tampa, Jacksonville, or wherever in between for a nice little New Year's vacation. New York.
Glen's by the big bosses first.
Glenn's going to New York first and foremost. And
I don't know. We haven't run it by yet, so maybe. Knock on wood.
We'll see. We'll catch you next time here on the Go 24/7